We're now recording, so we're now on.
Yay, the emperor. And CJ, I know that you were like the journal questions. They're here, and we can use the journal questions to kind of guide our conversation.
I also posted the.
Did you post the reading
I
question?
posted it in the chat, unless turning on the recording killed the chat.
So I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay, so turning on the recording must have killed it.
Well, and the reason why we don't see it is if you record, if you posted it like early,
Yeah.
then I logged in probably after you posted it, and so did CJ, which is why we can't see it. So you can't see any chat prior. You only see the chat from when you. So if you post it now, and like if we get new, and if we get anybody who's going to join us, they may possibly, then we'd have to repost it again.
Yeah.
So that we have it too. Yeah. You just have to keep up with that.
I can read the Rachel Pollack stuff.
And
well, so I'm going to be honest, that's what I was doing while y'all were talking, because it was so long that I didn't get through maybe just half of it.
Yeah. I had to do Cliff's notes. I was like, I ended up listening to a 15-minute podcast that was really good. I listened to them. I posted it. I went ahead and shared it in the group. But I listened to them. I think they have a really fun, they're all experienced tarotists. They've all been doing this for a while, and they have these kind of like conversation-based exchanges that are about 15 minutes long, and they bring some really interesting stuff. So if you have like stuff if you want to listen to that podcast, I'll start posting them. Because they've done I think they pretty much have done the entire deck at some point, plus a whole bunch of really interesting other stuff. And so I can post that stuff. But yeah, so I mean, I was just going to say our first question, you got do you have them there, Kurt?
I don't have the
questions from Pollack.
Oh, from Pollack. Yeah, I can pull those up on my phone real quick.
Is that for the emperor reading?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How am I an emperor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have the book.
Well, yeah, and so I wrote, so it's on page 73 for those of us that have the book.
Well, I have it. Let me get my book.
I didn't pull cards on it yet, but question number 2 said, how am I not an emperor? And I put LOL. And now that you tell me, Kurt, now I'm sort of getting it as it starts. I was just touching base on the Aries part in the reading.
I looked at a different source that explained in even greater detail the relationship between Aries and the Emperor, and it really made a lot of sense.
You want me to type it in? I've got it right here.
I'm sure you have a better keyboard than I do.
Let me do it. That's fine. No worries. I will do it. So
Kurt, what are you wearing on your necklace?
It's amethyst.
Oh, very cool. I like it.
Thank you. So Rachel Pollack mentions one of my favorite anecdotes from Exodus, but she doesn't go into the Hebrew implications in the language. She talks about Moses being unable to see the face of the Hebrew God, and so he goes into the cleft of the cave, but in the Hebrew, what it actually says is that God moons him. So basically, God doesn't show Moses his back; he shows Moses his ass. Anyway, that's.
It really says that?
Yes, it does. There's also a part where God gives an entire army hemorrhoids.
That's funny.
But and that's where we can talk about it relating to Aries, because because
I give everybody hemorrhoids.
No, because of the fiery. So the Emperor tends to represent because of the 4 syllables, and Rachel Pollack talks about this, but Yadhe, Vadhe, or Yahweh tends to represent the Hebrew God, whereas the Empress represents his consort Asheroth, which was kind of, her cult was kind of, you know, trounced upon by the patriarchy, so we don't hear about her so much. But you know, and also and you know, I was reading recently that Asheroth and Yahweh may have actually also been Hera and Zeus. And so you get in a lot of cards that we'll see, we're gonna see Zeus. I mean, Zeus is basically the emperor. And if you look at Zeus, part of what he did, I mean, part of his whole thing was cleverness, because he was able to trick his father into drinking a poison which made him vomit out his siblings, and then Zeus and his siblings defeat his father, right? And then, but they say then Zeus has to create a society where there is none, right? After they defeat the Titans, he basically has to create, or after they defeat Kronos, he basically has to create a society where there is none. Then they, you know, get into their war with the Titans and blah 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 blah. But we also know about Zeus's hubris. We also know about Zeus's sexual appetite, which is very much a part of the emperor. Incidentally, that's why the emperor wears red. A lot of the emperor cards have a lot of red in them. Specifically, the red represents Rajas, which is in Vedic you have Sattva, which is quote unquote goodness, Rajas, which is passion or sexuality, and Tamas, which is ignorance. So you have, with the emperor, you have the passion, so that everything's red, you know, because the emperor is very passionate. But the emperor is, so there there's two very, very different takes on Kabbalistically how the emperor works. So, and that's not even getting into whether the emperor is talking about earthly law versus divine law and all this stuff. This is completely separate from that. So you'll notice in Rachel Pollack's book, she associates the emperor with the Hebrew letter Heh. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It sounds like James Brown, which is kind of actually interesting if you look at what Heh means. It means window. And so the idea is that the emperor, that's where that Moses story comes in. That Moses is in the cleft of the earth, or the cave, or the vagina of the earth, if you will, and he's anchored there, which gives him the stability to have a window into the divine masculine. And so in Pollack's, which is actually Edward Waite's attribution of the Kabbalistic symbolism for the emperor, you have he comes between wisdom and beauty, or the divine child, or the seat of the soul. And so the idea there, the implication there is that, so the empress gives life, right? The empress just gives life, but there's no order to that life. So the emperor then gives order to the life. So the emperor is an artist, right? The emperor at his heart is an artist, because he is taking this creative energy and then giving it form, right? And so that's the Edward Waite version of that. And then you have the Crowley version, which puts the emperor between victory and foundation, essentially the astral plane, right before physical manifestation, or conclusion of earthly manifestation. So this makes sense if you're going to see the emperor as this just super, super fiery, passionate figure. We're going to see a lot of cards where what's emphasized is the emperor's fecundity, the emperor's sexuality. Aside from like the Edward Waite, where he's just sort of scowling and sitting there, you know. But really, the two key archetypal figures for the traditional emperor are going to be King Arthur and Zeus, and those are really who are represented, and also Osiris.
So really quickly, I have a deck called, let me get it for you, called Tarot of the Divine. I don't know
Ah,
if you've ever, let me go ahead and hold it up
that's
to you.
cool. Oh, I have that deck. I have not opened it because I don't have a place to put it, but I do have that deck.
This deck,
Don't put it down. There you go. Now I can see it.
yeah,
It's the best seller on Amazon. In fact, they were out of stock for weeks.
yeah. And when I purchased this deck earlier in the year, it was like 15 bucks. I mean, it was like, and this is why they're sold out. But this deck is basically, its foundation are things like folk tales, fairy tales, and any kind of deities. So that kind of lore, that folklore. And what's really interesting, last week we were talking about the Empress, and I just wanted to show you because we mentioned,
Oh
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
that's
and
beautiful.
lo and behold, this is
Yeah,
the
it's so
Empress
beautiful.
in this deck.
Mhm.
But the reason I wanted to bring this deck up is because you mentioned King Arthur, and that is exactly who
Yeah.
we've got represented here. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you that in some cases they've literalized that a little bit more, at least in this deck.
Mhm.
And then the other point I wanted to hear, and we can talk about it, as we move through our discussion this evening, but this idea, when I was prepping earlier today, listening to the podcast, they had a conversation about, is the emperor truly kind of an Aries, represented by Aries, or is it Capricorn? So it was a really interesting kind of debate about back and forth of which particular energy seems to come forth most in the Emperor card. So anyway, I just wanted to toss that in there.
The only way that I would throw out, the only reason I would throw out Capricorn is that Capricorn is female energy. That's the only reason why I would throw that out.
We were talking about in terms of, I mean, Aries being so overtly active energy that, or what was it, the way they described it, that no Aries would be sitting still.
Actually,
no
though,
Aries.
actually though, the some of what I read in what is it called? It's this book. I have to look up the title of it. It's an 800-page book on Kabbalistic correspondences in the tarot. And believe it or not, only $10 on Kindle. But they were real, in this author, who is a woman, she was really getting into that part of Aries is claiming their own space, and so that fits in with the Emperor. There's also with the Emperor, just about everybody I read, and I think I read like 8 different interpretations or something, but just about everybody I read cautioned, and there were 2 cautionary tales to the Emperor. One was that anyone that the Emperor can be the Emperor warns against rigidity, right? So the idea, and this is actually a point that was brought out in that Kabbalistic book, which I found really wonderful, that true leadership, because leadership, right, the commanding force, whatever, but true leadership, and this, Denise, because this is a big buzz thing in academia right now, is true leadership is service, right? True leadership is service. So a true emperor, right, is first going to ask, how can I serve, right? Versus a very, very rigid emperor would be like, okay, here are the laws and you cannot circumvent these laws, and so on and so forth. The other is, and this is also more more in line with Aries is that not to take advantage of the emperor's generosity.
Not to take advantage of the emperor's generosity.
Generosity. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's another thing they warn against.
Correct. And actually, both Pollock and a few other authors say that when an emperor comes up, the emperor comes up in a reading, it's the Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung slaying of the father scenario. In other words, to become the emperor, you have to slay the emperor, metaphorically speaking, right? So it's Luke Skywalker in the cave at Dagobah, where he goes in and he sees Darth Vader in the cave, and he has a fight with Darth Vader, cuts off Darth Vader's head, and the mask explodes, and it's his own face.
Yeah.
Right. So that is a part of the emperor. It could be a part of the emperor, that taking one's place in that authority role, and really finding out. And I love how Rachel Pollack asks the question in her discussion about if if all of a sudden you were given authority over something, what would you do? Would you be like, okay, cool, I'm going on vacation? Or would you be like,
roll
all
up
right,
the sleeves and get to work?
yeah. So and that determines too, what kind of role. It's like the poet Omar Khayyam, right? He was also a scientist and so on and so forth. But the Sultan, right, offered him like this major government post and all this stuff and everything, and he said, no, I don't want that. He's like, just give me this little stipend and leave me alone. And they so that
Well, I think it's really interesting. I mean, to think about it, and if we're going to think about the emperor in sort of totality, right? So always the shadow is always present, even though it isn't always necessarily acted upon, right? It's the life unlived. But the degree to which the emperor can, in certain circumstances, adopt a degree of rigidity, right? When I guess we could say the emperor reverse, perhaps, maybe
yeah.
some language that we use in the tarot community. This idea that when the emperor is not quite sort of embodying all of those sort of ideals of the emperor, is not necessarily embodying a service leadership attitude, for example, that there can be, I think, truly, right, truly sort of unhealthy embodiments of that. I mean, we can look at national politics, right? And we can look at the ways in which the emperor has played out on that stage. And so we know, probably we would say that's probably the emperor reversed, right? Or at least tilted on its side. That there is that aspect of the emperor, definitely. And I was watching, and I think so many of us are watching right now what's happening nationally on the political stage. I was reading a story earlier today where President-elect Biden gave his farewell address to I'm not sure who was gathered for it, but Delaware. So it's basically saying, I'm moving on, I'm leaving again, and I'm doing this. And what was really lovely about that moment was that they reported on 2 times where he teared up, right? That he became sort of overcome by these emotions twice. And that there was this, when I read that, for me, it felt so refreshing to have somebody who has an emotion other than tantrum and worse tantrum,
Yeah.
right? That there is that kind of very limited expression, the emperor at that particular level. Now, not everybody will necessarily agree with my particular perspective that I shared here, but I want to say that at least we can see the expansion of what the emperor and what those activities that an emperor in this sense could embody, right? So who was it? I was reading, I guess it was on Tarot Nerds, where they were talking about essentially it's like they're seeing a set of world events take place and they're saying, I'm seeing this is really playing out, this particular card or aspect of the tarot is really playing out. And that's how I kind of learn the tarot even more deeply, is to look for these, what's happening, on a public stage, right? And I can go in and say, ooh, how many of us a couple of weeks ago were like, ooh, a tower moment, or we say that this is what's going on. So it helps me to understand and deepen that a little bit more, because the emperor is certainly capable of being incredibly rigid and certainly capable of losing sight of the people or the structure or the culture that's being molded here, right? And so that very much is also, and in fact, Kurt, it's really refreshing that we're having this conversation, because oftentimes the emperor tends to be characterized in these ways, right? Where it's
Right.
sort of rigid and
Right.
and inflexible and things of that nature, and to bring it back and says, whoa, let's look at the emperor and its broadest encompassing. Sorry about the squeaky toy.
Well, and that's,
I thought you had a bird.
No, my
well,
puppy
it does sound like a bird.
toy. And sometimes he finds the squeaky and sometimes
So
he
Denise, that's interesting. I want to interject because I have recollections of getting readings when I was a lot younger,
Mhm.
and very seasoned reader.
Yeah.
I remember saying it's about rigidity and blah, 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 and all that. And maybe that was the intuition at the moment,
Yeah.
but it's very different. Like what I thought the emperor was, what I thought I knew it was, is opposite of what we're learning today.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, it is. It's expanding. It's allowing to soften my own sort of like black and white understanding of the emperor, because, what I think is really fair to say, again, when I was listening and prepping earlier, is that very few of us really don't want to live in a circumstance where we don't know what the rules are.
Oh yeah, and I
We kind of want to know what those things are, because then we start arranging ourselves in relationship to them, right?
well, I'll throw this out. I met Winona LaDuke, right, back in the day after she ran for vice president, and she was given a talk where I was teaching at the time, and she had this great points about less reliance on technology, because the U.S. government had completely just taken complete advantage of her people. Like, for example, like her tribe is not considered part of the United States, so they don't get water services and electricity services from, and all this stuff. And hopefully that's changed. This has been 20 some years ago. But my point was, her thesis was like, we need to rely less on technology and so forth. And I raised my hand and I was like, I understand where you're coming from. I said, but this wheelchair that I'm sitting in, because I had a much better wheelchair at the time, I said, this is made of titanium. I said, to produce titanium, you need technology, and so forth. And so, and in fact, I joke about this, but it's very true. The medication that I take is a product of the military-industrial complex. You have to have that. I mean, but I certainly absolutely agree that there are good ways and not so good ways to manage and facilitate that.
It's all about the ethics of
Yeah,
technology,
yeah.
right? And so is the emperor the technology, and the ethics of technology, or both?
I think
right?
he brings the ethics to it.
He's the architect of the ethics.
Architect of the ethics.
I would think
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing that I think is really, really helpful to know, right? I remember
Yeah.
I've had technology conversations with people before who were like, they are technologists, but they study the philosophy of technology and things like that. And, as my former colleague pointed out to me, she says, a pencil is technology.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
it is a tool that's been crafted to help make our world better in some way, right? And so that's a very you can quibble with that definition of technology. But
No,
anyway,
I absolutely agree. Language
I
is
wholeheartedly agree.
yeah.
language is technology. I mean, technically.
Using a
But,
bone to, I'm thinking about
yeah.
using a bone to kind of like, or whatever, a stick
As a scribe.
of a, yeah, something using, or even to just poke out, ants from a ant hill, I mean, that's a form of technological use.
Yeah.
It's a unique way of looking at an object and using it differently than what is originally intended.
But the one of the warnings of the emperor too is, to keep our egos in check when we do have power, and I wrestle with this. I'll be absolutely honest. I wrestle with every time I record a failing final grade for a student. Like, I get sick to my stomach,
Yep.
because I'm like, but if somebody, if there's like 16 assignments and somebody turns in 2, I mean, there's only
Or
so
do,
much you can
yeah.
do. But I do wrestle with that kind of stuff, and you think about people with like the best intentions. Like, I mean, this may be a poor example, but like Bill Clinton, for example, like the whole African American community voted for him because he's this novelty honky that plays the saxophone and knows everything there is to know about blues music, and and all this. But his crime bill was the worst thing that happened to the African American community before Donald Trump. So he's that's an example of a quote unquote emperor that really just completely undercut the people that supported him.
And that's the tricky part about being the emperor, I think, is because
yeah.
any kind of rule that you create that is to be helpful for society, it's going to, people are going to get left out of that, right? You think that it's a good rule, others think it's a bad rule, that kind of thing. And so it's very tricky to be in that role, when you're taking on that kind of leadership role. I mean, even when you ask the question, as sort of giving and benevolent as the question is, where can I be of service? It's still about ultimately making decisions about who you're going to serve and what you're going to serve in that moment. So, I mean, and in making that decision in and of itself is going to create a set of tensions, right? That are gonna be in tension with the emperor and those final decisions. So it's not easy. And I think if the emperor is balanced, they'll be able to recognize that and to acknowledge and to explain, right? This is the reasoning or rationale for why this is important here, right here and right now. And that these other things are also important, but not just in looking at the emperor as a leader, right?
And that's one of the areas that was pointed out about the emperor too, is setting healthy boundaries. Well, that was pointed out about Aries, but also the emperor is that one of the challenges is to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Yes.
That's one of the emperor's challenges.
Well, that's an Aries thing, but
that he has to do that
and
because no one else is doing it.
well, then that's his challenge, is to because if you have the power to create, the power to essentially, like in Rachel Pollack's deck, for example, there's a city pictured in the background, so the emperor is the architect of the city. If you have the power to create a city, it's like, where are you going to put your buildings? Where are you going to put how best is that going to serve? Who's that going to serve? Like Denise was saying, how is that going to serve the community the best, and so on and so forth. One of the things that Pollock pointed out too is like the river that we saw in the High Priestess, she says, has gone to a trickle, and that's really funny to me, because I think about Obama, like during his first campaign versus Obama like a year into his presidency, like how exhausted he was. This is like,
No joke. When presidents leave office, more so I think than vice presidents, you can see if they have really tried to be balanced. I mean, they're also older usually, so you're going to see that age. But
you can see it.
We're talking some gray hair, and I've got like some people comment, they're like, "Oh, your hair's gotten grayer." I'm like, "Be chair for a year and a half, right?" And your hair will be grayer too, because there are a lot of decisions you have to make that the sort of ethics of those decisions are weighing on your shoulder, and any kind of responsibility, right? But you see that in public servants. You see that if they've really been weighing that, I think you're going to see that on them physically.
Whereas
Like-
Wanda Sykes said, I think in like 2017, 2018, she's like, we're all getting older, but Trump's looking great. She's like look at he's making us get.
Yeah,
Because he's
exactly.
getting younger was the picture of Dorian Gray. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's something to be said. I think there was a lot of commentary early on about his spray tan, right? And about that kind of thing. And there is something to be said about skin that has that kind of like more melanin in it, right? You can hide that age a little bit more in some cases. And so that is not true for everyone. It doesn't hold true for everyone, of course. But I wonder. Yeah, that's really funny. He looks the same. I don't know. I'd have to go back and compare.
He actually has
I'd
aged.
have to go back and do a side by side.
In the last year and a half, he's aged tremendously.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it's like super tremendously. But all the ex-presidents look great. I mean, like but
They're
the
much
whole
happier now, right?
Yeah,
They're looking
whole-
like literally the weight of the world is off their shoulders. And
the whole service thing though makes me think of Jimmy Carter. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just, a lot of people criticized him as president, and I mean, he did some great things as president, but there were other things that maybe was not as expert in or whatever. But it's also a really difficult time to be president too. I mean, like incredibly difficult time. But I guess when is it not? But
every era has its
Yeah.
yeah, but in some people I think maybe there's a kind of temperament, right, that is also where it tends to serve better. And if you're much more, I don't want to say, I mean, I don't want to say that if you have less compassion, I'm not trying to say that, but some people are just more decisive and are okay with that boundary holding, right? That they're just fine and they can say, nope, this is a decision, this is the best one to have in this particular moment. And I think maybe I could say about President Carter is that he did have a deep sense of empathy, perhaps, and not that others don't, but some don't clearly. But there is a way in which if you have that deep empathy and the kinds of decisions you make, and they're going to impact someone a particular kind of way, that's going to weigh on you heavily, right? You might take a little bit longer to make those decisions because you're trying to hear more, you need more information before you can call the decision. And some folks like that are often, I've, people have been critical of them and have said they're indecisive, as opposed to just taking their time to weigh the decision and hoping to make the best decision given the circumstance.
Well, see, that was, I actually appreciated that about Obama because he actually gave academic answers. But if you don't come from an academic world, you don't know what that means. Like he's saying, this needs further consideration. Okay, I understand what that means. But if oh, he's being, wishy-washy, or he's being this or this or this, not necessarily. But
I love this question here from Pollock's spread that says, where am I not an emperor?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there are things that we all face on a regular basis, and where you're like, I am not the emperor. That is not the kind of decision I'm feeling well equipped to be able to make, or I'm not allowing myself to be to bring the kind of structure or order that needs to be, that would be the best form of service in that circumstance, right? So I love these questions because they're also, how am I not an emperor? And the other one, where do I need to take charge? And I can see those as sort of companion questions there. And then what energy what will help me to do that? Right. So those are great. I'm sitting back and I'm like, this would be a great spread to do I'm thinking about my own personal circumstances, but any of us who have to take on that kind of crafting and bringing order to chaos. A friend of mine who often, he often says that one of his biggest joys is bringing order to chaos. So I'm like, he loves to organize a junk drawer. It's like all the stuff that's just thrown in the junk drawer. He likes to bring that kind of sense of structure and order there.
see, I paid somebody to do it.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I pay somebody to do it, but
But
So
there
he must feel exhausted at times.
for one, yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's selective, so that's how you can preserve some of that energy, but that's that idea of wanting to, there are times, quite literally, where I want to ask this question: what do I need to help take charge of my laundry that's clean, that's been in a basket for a week, right? It's just like, here's some hangers and hang it up already. Come on. I
mine's
mean,
been in the basket for 3 years. I mean, I mean,
yeah,
different laundry, but the same basket. It's not.
and I don't
So,
think,
so there was a funny post on Facebook where you just have like this chest of drawers that's laundry baskets, like 6 laundry baskets.
I saw that. That's a good idea. You see, that's a great idea.
I love that. That's great. I mean, and this is not minuscule here. This is serious stuff, because it's the energy of the emperor that can help one with this stuff, right? But I was sitting back and I, honestly, to be quite, just to have a moment here, I finally felt like I had this huge breakthrough when, how you get these laundry sorters that have like 3 different, the colors, the whites, the whatever. I do tops, bottoms, and intimates, right? And I'm like, and the beauty of it is, for me, is that when I pull that stuff out of the dryer, I already know what kind of hanger I need in order to hang all that stuff up. And I don't have to sit there and sort through it all over again, which is such a weird little thing, but it's that little bit of structure that helps me then helps it all fall into place, so that way I can work on other bigger structures.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Last night when I finally got all my Zoom meetings for the first part of the semester plugged into my calendars for all then I was like, okay, the semester's going to start now. Like I've got it all in my calendars, because that's like, I woke up this morning like scared out of my mind because I thought it was Sunday and I hadn't started the Zoom for the church. Like, that's how I am about, like, I was like, oh, so, but I know that really what that was about was, am I supposed to be on Zoom right now for school? Do I have a class right now? Because it will literally take me 3 to 4 weeks to, get in the swing of, okay, when, especially everything being, remote, it's like, okay, when do I need to be on for this? When do I need to be on for this? And so on and so forth.
It's true. I mean, there's this way where I think teachers have to, this idea of, you set the structure for, there's certain things where you plug into place and put it into place. And until those things are in place, it's not going to go. Like it's
right.
not even going to, like, you're not ready to launch it, even though the calendar might say, guess what, you've got to launch this. And so there are ways in which these structures in our ways of thinking, right, are very emperor-like. Those are building blocks. I see them maybe as building blocks. I've got to have this foundational block in order to be able to put another block on top of it, to be able to do that. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it is clarifying for me just how, when you don't have a foundational piece to build other things on, or even kind of an architecture, right?
Right.
And a plan to build things on, things will remain chaotic for a while. And some people are more comfortable with that, right? And we all are to some degree, but aren't we? I mean, we all are to various levels of that. But I think that there is that, definitely, it's got to be very.
I haven't built any of my course shells yet. I just have the syllabi in there, but
Go as you go, right? I mean, sort of as you go, but at least you're not like, I don't know what to do next, right?
Right.
Exactly. I know, even if it's only like 2 sentences, I know, okay, I'll go with this. Give me a couple hours. I'll have something ready to go,
When I first started the chairship, we had an interim right before me, and she had been the chair several years before, but so much had changed since she'd done that. And then we had 4 different chairs in 4 years, just to give you an idea. There wasn't real. So there was this patchwork quilt of things that didn't really work. And then they were like, we had 2 meetings, and they're like, okay, figure it out. And I'm like, wow, so it was one of those things where coming up with some sort of architecture in order to be able to move forward was really, really really, really necessary. And
Yeah.
I'm not proud of it, but I tell you what, I complained more than once about, we need a handbook.
No, seriously,
We
my
could use
department
one.
it took like 3 years, but my department created explicit bylaws for that very reason. And our chair now is stepping down at the end of she's actually going to retire,
Yeah.
and which is fantastic for her, not for us, but for her. But anyway, it's but the procedure is in place, and it's going to be a very, because all this was anticipated.
Well, and we think about it. We talked earlier about how we really do want rules to some degree, right? And or maybe to a lot. We want a lot of rules. Just depends on I guess what we're engaging in. But it really is about, when I think about laws and I think about rules and I think about buildings, right? Architecture and how things are built to sort of withstand the test of time. It really is about that sense of continuity, right? Why the Constitution is what it is, for example, and has suffered very little change, to the good or bad, the detriment, but it's something that is supposed to move through all of these eras of time to some degree fairly intact, right? Is it a good plan? If it's a really good plan, then we want to keep moving it forward. If it's not a good plan, we want to get rid of it or alter it so it becomes a better plan.
The beauty
And so
about
you
the
have the
Constitution.
Texas Constitution, but anyway.
Oh no, the Texas Constitution is horrible.
Oh, it's crap. But I mean, so
Yeah.
you've got these two different documents, right?
Yeah.
And I think that thinking about the emperor in terms of what does it also mean to, I guess the other question would be, if you are in your like best emperor state, you recognize that when something is not working, right, that you're willing to let that go, release it, to acknowledge that it's not working, to find something that's going to better work, right?
So I think, a good emperor, an ideal emperor, is equally willing to serve and learn also. Because that's...
I have to let my little puppy out. Yes.
So
Right. And it is really interesting because I think when we think about the emperor in this very sort of, if we think about it in a public sense or public idea of the emperor on the stage, right, where we're also looking to see, we're wanting our leaders to succeed, I think. I mean, I think that we want to see successful leadership in the form of the emperor. We want to see that. And when we don't see it, it's really, for me, it's painful to watch. It's hard to watch. It's hard to endure it.
That's
right?
the King Arthur. I mean, the emperor, the king is the land and the land is the king.
Yeah.
And that's not, and psychologically there is some of that, as a couple weeks ago showed us, with when so
when there was a trying to topple the law, right? This attempt to kind of topple the law, or to say this law is not working for a certain, or this extreme understanding of what was happening. I just pulled up, Kurt, your handout that your collage, your emperor collage that you put together for us every week. Maybe we could kind of, if you guys, are you ready to move through some of those images?
Yeah, let me bring it
Yes.
up. Oh wait, that's the wrong screen. Sorry.
Oh, hi, there we are.
Hold on.
And
Stop share. I just saw the emperor and I'm like, oh, but no, that's the wrong screen. Let me see.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to have to step away because I have had lots of fluids and.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Here we go.
Okay, the middle card is from what deck?
That is Robin Wood. I really like her work. I had this deck way back, like when it first came out, like 1991.
It's beautiful.
It's a really good deck to learn on because the images, I mean, like you can get a lot if even if you don't know, you know, the symbolism behind the card or anything, you can get so much just looking at his face.
Okay, so look at the one on my left as I'm looking at the screen where he's got his body cockeyed. Yeah, no,
Okay.
go back.
This,
That one. Okay, so remember in Pollock, she talked about how the water became a trickle and there wasn't this huge emotions and he lacks grain and he lacks abundance. But look around this one, he's got flowers, he's got grain, and he's got a huge body of water that's not a trickle.
he does, but he's not paying attention to it.
Yeah, he's one of the ones with a scowl on his face, which
yeah.
mostly in mine, in all the ones that I own, I don't, she briefly talked about that in the part I read, and I don't see a lot of that in the ones that I have.
He'd be more of the, yeah. This is more of the,
Of a warning one?
kind of the patriot. So yeah, and Pollock talks about, you know, the emperor being seen, a lot of people fearing the emperor, quote unquote, because he's seen as like the patriarchy.
Right.
And so this would kind of be an example of that. And also he's kind of giving Ares a bad name here because he's got the ram's heads.
So like, you obviously, when you were reading professionally, did you use one deck exclusively, or did you access?
I used the main deck that I used was Osho, but I would occasionally use Symblon, which does not follow the Rider-Waite system at all. It's its own thing. But those were the main decks I used because in those two decks, the images are such that like people that know nothing about tarot could look at those images and get like you could do that with this. Like you could totally do that with Robin Wood, because you can look at him, right, and you may not know anything.
Yeah, but hang on, my brain was going somewhere else with this. Let me ask you this real quick, because or else I'll forget.
Okay.
So the same card in different decks, because of imagery,
right,
could have different interpretations, so to speak.
Yeah.
We're not going to be rigid on interpretations, and then we bring the intuitive psychic part into it as well.
It's like, right, it's like any system of, because the cards are basically a system of metaphor or language that you're interacting with, right? This is language.
Part of what I want to do as a reader is, and I have a friend who does this, like if she knew I was coming for a reading, even before I got there, maybe knowing, maybe not knowing what I'm coming for, the situation, she would ask, not me, ask, what deck to pull for me. And she has, I don't know, umpteen, she'd put us all to shame. And so she would pull that deck and I'd get there and she'd say, well, I pulled this deck for you. This was the deck that called to me for this reading, or that I asked and it said, use me or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. The last reading that I actually paid for is a friend of mine. She did it over Zoom and she had two decks. I think she certainly, I'm sure, owns more than two decks, but she had two decks and asked me to pick between the two decks. And I picked one and she said, yeah, that's what I thought. That's the one I thought you would choose.
Okay.
You know, so yeah, and like, for example, like the book for this, and it's not in the deck box, but like the supplementary book that's actually in the app for this, like she explains every art, because she's an artist. She's primarily an artist. I mean, she's a pagan, and so her deck is like extremely infused with, you know, pagan imagery, but she's primarily an artist, so she explains every artist choice that she makes for this deck. And a lot of those books, some of those books, especially like if you get the bigger companions, or like some of them have like 2 companions or 3 companions for them, I don't know, but the artist will talk about why they painted them certain ways and why they put them in certain positions and stuff.
Right.
And like that kind of stuff helps get a sense for, you know, the deck as well. Like
So-
for example, the Shadowscape one.
So
Right.
in the center one, which is the Robin Wood, is that?
Yeah, yeah.
There's no water there. There's the earth.
You're right. Yeah, so he's kind of desolate, but see, in this one he doesn't know it. Like he's it's almost like, so I'm getting two ideas from his face. One is Charlie Sheen with a fake beard, you know, winning. Or the other is Sean Connery, you know, the old, you know, older, you know.
I'm getting Sean Connery.
Me
He
too.
did have options.
And Sean Connery is loaded too, like because on the one hand he's just, you know, has this warm public persona and stuff, but on the other he had a reputation for roughing up women, you know. So I mean you know, he's kind of a, but I am getting that Sean Connery like kind of Ramirez like Highlander kind of look, but also the Charlie Sheen, like, you know, it's like I don't care if I don't have any water, you know. I don't.
Can you speak to the world that we see in many of these cards?
The world. That's well. So it's either going to be a Kabbalistic choice if they're keen on the Kabbalah.
So it's at his feet in the Robin Wood, and then
the world. Okay, so
and I don't know if that's the world that the one on the left is holding that we were discussing earlier.
So is that a world or is that a crystal ball?
See, I don't know, but it looked like Greenland at the
Either,
bottom.
and
and then his feet are on the world, and then I've got one that he's holding a globe under the Ankh, which we.
So this must be a globe then, yeah.
And then I have another one where it's more like it probably represents that. I don't know, but it's like an orb.
Yeah, I've got that deck too.
They almost always have an orb.
Crystal Visions.
Yes, I'm so glad you have that, Denise.
Yeah, I have this one. And then I have this deck, which is the Light Seer deck.
Okay.
Light Seer's Tarot.
Okay, I want to see that better.
You see that? I don't know. He's got
What's he hold? Is that a drum behind him?
It's actually, you know what it is? It's the king. Well, no. That's, I think, a kind of.
Like, what's that white thing?
The white thing in his hand is a chess piece. It's the king chess piece.
I thought it was some kind of thing to beat the drum behind him with.
Yeah, and so you can see the floor is a checkered chessboard.
Oh, got it.
See that this is, I'm thinking Mars, the red planet.
Yes.
Yeah, for Aries, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then you see, of course, you see up here that
the
reinforcement.
Oh.
But notice how relaxed.
Yeah.
No,
and that's Light Seers.
And his legs are crossed in a 4, which is a characteristic of the Emperor as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that on your slide on the right.
Yeah.
So we've got that here, and then I think the other cards that I have, anyway, the other decks that I pulled from Arthur is standing, and Light Seers Tarot is also standing.
Wasn't the Light Seers Tarot the one you just did? Oh, that's Crystal Visions. Okay.
Oh, Crystal Vision, sorry. Yeah, Light Seers is sitting. This is the King Arthur, and this is the, I don't have all my names, the Tarot of the Divine.
Yeah, I'm really liking that Tarot of the Divine. Where did you order it? Amazon?
It's very expensive. It's $19 on Amazon now.
Yeah.
Is that where you ordered it, Denise?
That's where I got it, and when I bought it, it was $15. I was shocked. So that was earlier though. That was probably the summertime of last year. So
Yeah, I think it came out in October of last year, I want to say, or something like that. It came out,
yeah,
it hasn't been out that long at
it
all.
hasn't been out. If that's true, it's only been out over a little over a year. And then this is my everyday witch, where he is sitting, but not cross-legged.
And so I like, he has his German Shepherd sleeping with him. Can we talk about this one a second, you guys? Because I have this one too. He's got all the, what, is that the constellations at his feet? A map of constellations?
Right now, the one that's on the left.
The Everyday Witch.
Oh, the everyday witch. Yeah.
He's got a map of constellations, and then the world is really at the top of his scepter.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you see that? Like, I haven't opened the book because I want to see what I see first. But then he's got the cat too. Are we seeing any relation to Aries in here? No. And in all his desolation of rocks there, he's got green growing up in between all the crevices. I don't know, is there just, I'm just trying to glean any wisdom from you before we move on.
I was going to say that, I mean, if there is going to be a tie, then maybe the red cloak.
And talk to me about the crown with the antlers.
The
That's
crown.
masculine. That's masculine energy.
Just
That's-
masculine energy. Okay.
Yeah. A kind of maybe a reference to the horned god. And then this one has a dog. Do you see the dog?
Yes, the German Shepherd. That's what I was saying. I love that.
I do too. And sort of
I
that.
think Pollux has a dog too. Some other ones I've seen have dogs.
So Denise, I ordered a used Oracle of Everyday Witch.
Oh, did you? When you get it, let me know what your
I
thoughts.
will. They come bigger, but she supposedly mailed it, but I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay. Well, let me know once you have a chance to work with it. I'm curious. I haven't.
Because I'd like to maybe do a reading with the Oracle and the Tarot
Yeah.
in
Yes. Together.
complementing each other.
I love it. There's a gal on YouTube who has a channel. It's Boho Tarot, and her deck collection's amazing. So I watch it because of her deck collection. But she also does. She modifies decks. Like some of the cards come and they're so large, and she can't really handle them, so she trims them down. She's an artist as well, so she trims them down. Like she'll hack her cards. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not that brave.
Me
But
either.
and her deck remodifications are just beautiful. Or deck modifications are just beautiful. But she often will do these beautiful videos. They're kind of long. They're about 30-ish minutes, about these pairings of oracle cards and tarot cards and what works really well. And she has such a beautiful kind of it's a lot of it's the artwork. The artwork is compatible, not always. And she does things like seasons. Like this is the tarot decks I'm working with this season, and she does
Cool.
really cool. I'll share her channel, the link to her channel, so you can.
Oh, next slide. Okay.
King Arthur, right?
Uh-huh.
Zeus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is also the horn god.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Like, I've
And
never had an affinity for the horned god, but that's beautiful.
well, this is very Aries. I mean, this is here because the ram's horns are for Aries, right?
Yeah.
And he's got two wolves.
I mean, that is a beautiful card. Okay, that's from one of your double decks.
Yes, yes. Wait till you see the companion to this. It's at the end because it's a surprise for you.
Okay.
And then he's got, what does he have hanging right there at his waist belt? That's another.
I was looking at that, and I don't.
So it looks like
Oh,
it's a bronze skull of
It is.
possibly Aries. That's
Yeah.
like it's protecting his private parts.
Yeah,
in
which
battle.
speaks to the fecundity, the sexuality of the emperor.
You know,
No,
that's
it's-
his jockstrap.
Very phallic.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. So it's phallic without being lewd, I guess you would say.
No, for some
Yeah,
reason,
yeah.
that is gorgeous. Like that makes me have a whole different take on what I have preconceived about the horned god.
I love these wolves here, and I never noticed them until just now, honestly. Till just looking at this
They're cool.
right now, or the
Well,
two.
and with him being balanced, like Denise was talking about, which wolf do you feed that's inside you? We all have two
Oh,
wolves.
that's
You gotta
perfect.
feed.
Yeah.
And he's got his hand in holding like almost the scruff of one, but he doesn't even have to exert the effort. It's just barely touching it. And then his hand is gently behind the
I
other,
love
but
it.
holding space for it.
I love
So
it.
he's holding space for both gently, but he's preserving the balance.
I love it.
That's
That is
awesome.
great.
Woo! I made an A today in class.
That's fantastic.
You did great. That's
Also,
really cute.
also he's kind of serene too. Like he's got this,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. And look at the forest behind him.
Yeah.
Mhm. And the moon. We've got the god. We've got a version of the goddess emblem behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gore. Like now, that's one of my favorite cards in this whole presentation.
Yeah.
Wait till you see. I've got
Oh,
some.
he says, but wait, there's more.
Go, go, go.
One of my favorite. One of the things I like about doing this the best is figuring out how I'm going to position these cards. Like,
Well, I was wondering that.
Okay,
so
so what do you have next for us?
here are these. This is the Rosetta Tarot, and the emphasis here is on the red, on the passion, on
Yep.
the
Fire.
Aries nest. He's got the 4 here of
The legs.
his legs are in the
The
4.
legs.
He's got the orb there.
Did we speak to what the world is?
I think it's that he's the architect of the.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's always in conjunction with an ankh or a cross of some sort.
yeah, and the Ankh is an association with Osiris, and ultimately the cross is too. In these decks, what's emphasized is the is that a sextant? Is that what that's called? The
Oh yeah, the tool for an architect.
yes, and
The
that's
sextant.
that's reminiscent of obviously of Freemasonry architecture. Also, specifically mentioned is the poet William Blake, because he's all about the architecture of the universe and so on.
Sexton, architecture,
And then you have
architecture.
bull. These are, well, I guess these are rams, not
And
bulls.
then also, I mean, do you see how in between the two legs of the sexton, the line underneath? And remember in Pollock, she was talking about pyramids and the number 4.
Yes. That's the easiest. She said it was the easiest geometrical form.
Right.
Yeah.
And then speak to the shield with the.
So that this is the, so you'll see this. This is in Rider Waite. The shield, but also it's the eagle, right? Which is representative of spirituality, etc. But Pollock and tarot historians say it goes back to the Habsburgs. So it's like the Habsburg family seal.
Yeah.
Here's one of your favorite decks over here.
Oh, Tabula Mundi.
Tabula Mundi. And so this time the Emperor's in profile. He's got the beehive because the queen of the bees, she gives life, but then it has to be, the life has to be ordered. So the beehive is all about the order. We've got the sextant again. We've got the eagle eye, which is eagle eye or hawkeye, whichever here. Again with
and
the
what's
red.
the eagle eye or hawkeye for?
Well, if it's a hawkeye, it's Horus. It's
Okay.
But I'm not sure if it's an eagle eye or a hawk's eye.
What
Ozy-
about those emblems on each side balancing at the top? The red and black?
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't know if that meant something that I'm not
It
familiar with.
probably does, but I don't know. There's sunflowers.
Yeah,
They're inside sun. And here you have twin suns here
yeah.
and
Mhm.
twin sunflowers here.
Balance, okay.
And
And he's got two hooks and he's got something with smoke coming out at the
Okay, so
bottom or something.
the two hooks in these decks use the Crowley attributions. So this Hebrew, the Hebrew symbol here is Sadi. I know I'm not saying that right, but it means fish hook,
Okay.
and so that's what that's in reference to. But and then Ozymandias, it comes from Percy Shelley, but I'm not ashamed to admit, but I'm more familiar with Ozymandias in The Watchmen, who was the smartest man in the world, right? In The Watchmen, but in The Watchmen, Ozymandias was also the villain, but he was perfectly and totally convinced he was doing the right thing. Nobody understood him, but he was totally doing the right thing. So that's again a warning about the warning against ego, right? Because you can have someone with a great deal of power who's doing some pretty terrible things and is convinced that they're doing the right thing, but nobody is, but they're just completely misunderstood, and you know.
And who did you say it originally was? Shelley?
Percy Shelley, yeah, yeah. There's a long poem called Ozymandias. Yeah.
And what's
And
that thing at the bottom? Do you know anything about that little vessel that it looks like smoke is coming out, or what is that?
I don't know what that. I'm wondering if that's like an incense. I thought maybe incense. I don't know. It probably has more
Oh, okay.
significance than that, but
Okay, and the rebel.
yeah. And then for Osho just turns the whole idea of emperor kind of on its head and says the emperor's the rebel, which in a
But
way,
in a good way, like
Yeah.
that's how I saw myself, in my punk days. Like it's
Mhm.
all for good, and you couldn't find anybody more fucking passionate than true rebels.
yeah. Well, and if you look, for example, like at the story of Zeus and the story of Krishna, the story of Jesus, right? Incidentally, one of the things that they all have in common is they're all born. Well, Jesus and Zeus are both born in caves. If you look at the Hebrew, he was not born in a quote unquote like stall or whatever. He was born in a cave, or not Hebrew, but Aramaic or Greek. But anyway, but then you have Krishna who was born in a prison and so on and so forth. But ultimately, what they do is they upend the establishment, right? To establish a new order, right? To establish new laws, which are hopefully more compassionate, more in line with service and so forth, than more indicative of the empress energy that gave them life, right? Than what had been previously. Um, but the danger always is that the new emperor will be a tyrant, right? And so the rebel's very fiery. He's got the torch, he's got the flaming hair.
And he's beautiful and happy,
Yeah.
and like it's a really good positive thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what is that? Is that a hawk with him?
Probably it's either a hawk or an eagle.
Eagle.
Because I didn't see any white, so that's why I was assuming it was a hawk.
Could be a golden eagle.
Golden.
Yeah, the golden eagle was on the Zeus card as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Look at that mustache.
Yeah.
It looks like it came off Tom Selleck in the
80s, yeah. He kind of does. He kind of does look like Tom Selleck from the 80s. Yeah.
From the 80s.
Yeah. It's so funny, like growing up, that you don't really see a difference between the character they play and the person. Like, you kind of thought Magnum PI was, because I was little, so it's like
Yeah.
Magnum PI was the guy, you know. which, you know, a lot of people thought that, you know, Trump on The Apprentice was the real Trump. I mean, you know.
Sure, I watched The Apprentice.
Yeah, I did too. I you know.
I watched it specifically when Martha Stewart finished her
Oh,
prison term and then was a guest on The Apprentice. And I was forever, talk about an emperor moment at the very end of that. Do you remember Bethany? Bethany Frankel was one of the finalists. If you know Bethany Frankel from all of her her reality TV shows that she's been on since then. But she essentially was one of the finalists, and there was this other young woman who I don't know what happened to her, where she went, but she was the one who was offered the job. And I'll remember Martha Stewart's parting words essentially to Bethany Frankel, which is, you are nothing but self-serving. Every decision you make is about you, has nothing to do with the team or the larger good. I can't use somebody like you in my company. Sorry, you know, that kind of thing. And she wasn't so sorry when she said it. I think she at that point was just fed up with the selfish, kind of selfishly motivated. I'm more than anything, probably that sort of very naked ambition that's not, you know, she wasn't even trying to couch it in anything but. And so the woman who ended up winning that season was an immediate, I mean, like a really good team player. She was really good. She had incredible leadership skills or communication skills to pull people together, to make ethical decisions. I mean, all of those, you know, the emperor looking for an emperor, right? So it was interesting. But yeah, anyway.
My favorite thing about Martha Stewart is her partnership with Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so great.
Yeah, because actually my favorite reality show was Snoop Dogg's reality show. It was freaking great.
I haven't
I mean,
seen
it only lasted like 2 seasons because I guess people expected him to be like this hard guy or whatever, but no.
How old is Snoop Dogg anymore? I mean, he's in his 50s, I would imagine.
He is a year older than me, so he would be 47.
Okay, so closing in. All right. So
Yeah,
this particular point is life. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, this was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and even then, he was like, his wife was clearly in charge. You know, he's been with his wife since they were in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
Such a different persona. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So what else do you have for us here?
All right.
Our next slide, I want to see.
So they're getting so the idea is that they're getting progressively more removed from the traditional depiction.
Yeah.
So here's Rachel Pollack, and of course she put a lot into this, and her whole motivation for doing this, the emperor this way, is to kind of divorce him from the patriarchy.
Okay.
And so he is a shaman here.
Mm-hmm.
He's a shaman, and this is of course the bull or the ram for the Aries, and then in the background we have a city, which is like acknowledgement of you know, the creativity that it takes to create and bring that creative energy into form. And then of course we have the dark cubes, which are balanced. Yeah.
And then the idea of having she has a bull represented here.
Yeah, and the bull, Pollock loves bulls because like if you read, and this book is not in print, which sucks because she actually makes reference to the same trip that she went to Crete on in the Tarot Wisdom book, but she has a whole book about that trip to Crete. And in it, she talks about the relationship between Dionysus and Hades and bulls, and it's just a fantastic book. It's called Body of the Goddess, but I believe it's out of print. But yeah, and she said that she had something happen on the trip, and she turned to her friend and said, Zeus is playing with us. Something about the number 4 or the emperor, and she said Zeus is playing with her. So Zeus wants us to know that we're entering his realm.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah. this is our Shadowscape.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got the world or the orb here. He's got the horns. He's got a cross hanging from his horn.
The Ankh. Uh-huh.
The Ankh, yeah, which is Osiris, in reference to Osiris. Whereas the Empress and the High Priestess were Isis, different faces of Isis. And also there's a relationship between, because so in tarot numerology, so the number 4, you can take any of the digits that will add up to 4. They have a relationship with the previous number. So for example, death is 13, so 1 plus 3 is 4. So there's a relationship between the death card being, you know, a death of one cycle and the beginning of another in relationship to the emperor, because the emperor is can be about overturning tyranny and creating the new order, which we see in Zeus, which we see in King Arthur, etc. And we also see, for example, in King Arthur, we see his downfall that way too, because he becomes the tyranny, right? He kind of becomes what he, originally set out to prevent in some interpretations. But also, Pollock makes the point of the Fool can either be seen as the 0 card, or it can be seen as the 22nd card. Depending on, in really old decks, the Fool is actually not 0, it's 22. So the Fool also has a relationship with the Emperor as well, and there's all different ways we can see that. And when I was reading that today, interestingly, because she talks about myths from using myth to decode the Emperor, and also literature. And the literature I thought of was, believe it or not, Conan. Robert E. Howard's Conan, because Conan starts out literally a foolhardy character, and ends up a king on a throne. Literally, he looks like the images that you'll see depicted of King Conan, when he's older, is like an emperor card. So I thought of Conan, and it's funny because Conan is the emperor, and or he's the king, but he doesn't really want to be. He's there, and he knows that like that's the pinnacle of power, but he's like,
when you share that, I think of Henry V.
Yeah,
sort of having to step into that role, right?
Right.
And not being ready for it, but being made ready. I mean, being forced to have to be ready, right? And to assume the responsibility of what it means to step in to those shoes. And it was the idea of the death of the king. In order to give rise to the new kingdom, you have to have the death of the old in order to birth the new. So that's cool. I like that association there.
And also, I think Pollock or somebody else mentioned King Lear. That's kind of a more negative aspect to the emperor, kind of losing his mind a little bit. Been on the throne too long.
Mm-hmm.
Which we saw that with Mr. Reagan. I mean, Alzheimer's.
Towards the
yeah.
I wouldn't put it past Trump either.
Well, we don't know it's people are going to be making their careers on what the hell is wrong with Trump for the next 20 years.
What's going on there?
But
what's probably narcissistic personality,
among other things, yeah.
Among other things,
I was going to say something else about but I can't. I can't.
About Shadowscapes?
Just about the Emperor in general, but I can't think. And again, you've got the passion for the red, but again, not altogether separate from nature.
Right.
No, because nature's just wrapped around.
Yeah,
and then you see the little sprites or whatever on the branches.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 2 little sprites there.
And that's a Shadowscape thing. They follow the major arcana throughout the story. I just put this one in here because the ringmaster, like Jerry Springer. I just thought of like Jerry Springer, like and then that's actually really funny because everybody's screaming Jerry, Jerry, and he's like, "Why are you saying my name?" And so that's the whole thing about being the center of attention, or being in really like what
Well, I think the ringmaster is very apropos actually, because
Yeah.
there's this way in which they orchestrate and organize,
Yeah.
to which they are still the center of attention, even though they bring in all of this talent, right, to go in. And so, yeah, that seems like an appropriate choice there.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I just saw the Ringmaster, and I thought of that movie, the Jerry Springer movie. But
Is that one of your decks on your phone?
no, it's so there's a Dex there. You can get this for app for free. It's a deck. It's a sampler, and like for each card, they'll have like 4 or 5 different cards of the exact taken from the 60 plus however many decks that they have as apps. So
It's just a cool card. I like it.
yeah. So that's where I got like the cow card we saw last week was from like the deck sampler. Which I might actually eventually get that deck because I'm all about animals, and that was just I like that attribution of the cow with the Empress that they did. So this is a totally different approach. This is the Emperor as the Green Man.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so we have the fecundity. We have and it's a more. This is a little darker. I mean, here he's actually grown into the tree and everything, and there's the gifts of nature, etc. But he's kind of not. Looks like he can't really access them. It's kind of it's almost like I'm getting like a regret kind of,
Yeah.
For what nature is, I mean, we don't see the vestige of civilization, but if the emperor represents that, where I think about it, it's like, it doesn't take very long for an abandoned anything to be overcome by nature again, right? So
right, like not long at all. We found out with Chernobyl actually.
Yeah.
And
Does
that
not take long. And I think the energy or effort it takes to maintain and keep it at bay is more than.
That's actually a great point. So it's kind of like nature just reclaimed him.
Yeah, nature reclaimed him. It's
That is
interesting because
awesome.
that's a kind of like pinnacle, right? Because the emperor can, especially in these depictions, can go teeter-totter either way, right? So the idea is to create that balance, because we've seen balance in other representations and some of the other versions of this, but where is that balance there? It's just, and also the tree is a structure. The tree is also a structure as well. It's very structured. In fact, all of nature is very, very structured. There is no true chaos to nature. When you dissect anything that's out in the natural world and you start to see its patterns, you're like, whoa, there's patterns. Yeah. Cool. That's a really interesting.
So this deck is like one of those. It's like $90. Like this like if you were to buy the deck, because this artist apparently is very sought after. But
you're killing me with these expensive decks that I love, Kurt.
No, but this app is $4. I mean, I'm thinking about getting it. I haven't really seen that many cards from the deck, but she based it all around cycles of the moon. So like, for example, so he's full moon cycle of Aries. Okay. So full moon in Aries is and I just love this. Like, this is just so sweet. In this, the interpretation that comes with this is all about the emperor as someone who oversees nurturing, like who still taking that active role, but in a more supportive, nurturing way. He says he's like overseeing the growth of the bird and the eggs, and
caring for them so they're not broken.
Yeah.
Who is that guy? He's it's like the guerrilla gardener or something like that in Los Angeles, and has taken all of these sort of abandoned places and essentially started planting. It's urban gardening, started planting like vegetable gardens in these sort of patches of like, he started with his own home, and he has this, he was like in South Central LA, and
oh wow,
Yeah, and started doing that. And this kind of sense of, I see that as a very Green Man kind of thing, where he's the nurturing, definitely in the middle of this city, right, with all this concrete. And he said, hey, I can plant food here, or I can plant grass here. You
So,
know, what are we going to do?
so
Like, hold on a second. I'll be right back. But go ahead, I can hear you.
did you ever see Black Jesus?
No, I haven't seen it.
So the idea was Jesus came back as a black man in Compton. And his whole thing was he wanted to build a community garden. He wanted to build a community garden in the ghetto and grow and have a pot farm in the community garden.
Way go, Jesus.
And the whole thing is like theologically it was perfect. Like there's a certain point of view amongst certain Christians about, you know, about that kind of community building theology. But his whole thing was he through the growing of the pot farm and the vegetable garden he was able to make peace between the Hispanic gangs and the black gangs and
Very cool.
and like one of his apostles, because he had apostles, and one of his apostles was like dating like a white or his Latinx cop, and he's like, yo, you need to like work that out because that's good love between the peoples, and but I think I know that's on like streaming services.
Awesome.
CCJ, if you ever come over to look at my decks, I'm gonna make you watch all this crap.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, so speak to the last one before you go. Go back real quick, please.
Okay. Oh, I forgot. We haven't talked yet. So this is a more serious version of the Green Man. This, if you remember the Green Woman that you loved so much last week, this is her counterpart.
Yeah.
The Green Man from the Wildwood Tarot,
Yeah.
which is also extremely inexpensive, by the way, on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's only $19.
Yeah.
And actually, no, though they dropped it down at $16. I need to get
$16
it before it jumps to like 30.
Yeah.
Because
Well-
I've seen it on Etsy for 40.
So talk to, tell me, because I saw this in another, I don't think it's one I have, but one in your thing.
Mhm.
Talk about the horn that he has in his hand, in his left hand.
So I think that's just indicative of the whole relationship to Aries, honestly. I mean, I don't know that it has a
Well, so growing up, my great grandmother had one of those horns like that you blow that woo,
a shofar.
hanging on her wall. I mean, I knew nothing about it, but on one of your previous cards at the beginning of the slideshow,
Yeah,
that thing that you blow, he had it hanging on his back of his
that
throne.
was on the Robin Wood. Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I didn't have time to read her description because her descriptions are like super, super, super long, and I didn't have time to read it before we did this, so I don't know why.
I was just curious if it had another thing besides Aries.
Well, I think it's like a bullhorn, right? It's not like the horn of a goat or anything
right.
like that. It's that bull horn, and we saw the reference to bulls earlier.
Well, and the whole thing is like, for example, even if you read like in the Bhagavad Gita, the first thing they do, I mean, they're blowing conch shells, but the idea is they're making these loud noises, essentially to announce, to strike fear in their opponents, So that aspect of the emperor is like, look, I'm here, don't mess with me, like, and
There's
I think
there, yeah.
I think the shofar in I mean, and I know there are other traditions where you blow in a horn. I'm just thinking about in the Jewish tradition where they blow the horn. I believe that is to announce the presence, the holy presence. So but it's interesting, he doesn't have like an orb or the world. He's got a cauldron, which is mythologically reminiscent of that too, but also reminiscent of the feminine. So he's also, even though he's the masculine, he's very in touch with interacting with the feminine energy. The cauldron is blazing, of course, and he does have his staff, And there's an eagle, I believe, on the side here.
Yes.
Well, they're both, I mean, they're, that's definitely, I think the horn and the cauldron is the sort of the sexual connection.
Oh, you're right.
Oh,
You're
yeah. Thank
right.
you.
Yeah, so that's like the great right
Mhm.
imagery there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't see it, but it's absolutely there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the challenge of the and that is, if you were to sum up the challenge of the emperor in one statement, it would be to remain balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, to remain balanced, to not be consumed by that fire.
Love it.
And then I thought interesting the little artwork on the rock behind him.
Yes, I see that.
Oh yeah, okay, okay.
The little
Yeah.
V
And I mean, not, I mean, and he's erect in that artwork as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
See,
he's got a club in his hand, so it looks like
I wouldn't have seen that. That is, yeah, that's definitely significant.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah,
All
the
right.
more we talk about this deck, the more I like it.
I'm liking it too,
Yeah,
Kurt.
yeah.
Y'all are really bad influences on people trying to.
So this is the CJ page. This is all about CJ. So this is the Emperor, as I believe she's a mountain lion. He's a mountain lion. I don't know. Upward pointing triangles do tend to represent masculine energy, but focus and stability for the oh, what is this called? I forget what deck this is. Spirit Song. Spirit Song. So for the Spirit Song, the Emperor is focus and stability. And if you think about a big cat, that's most of what a big cat does, is wait for its prey. And knowing when to act, knowing when it's
timing.
Yeah. So that speaks to the creativity and the connection with the soul, the creativity coming from the soul of the Emperor. There's this whole thing in Indian philosophy that there is no such thing as instinct. That what we say in the West as is instinct, what it is it's the inner workings of the soul. So that, like, even the little beetle or whatever the little creature may be, it's acting the way it's acting because that's the soul acting through that body and through that what mind may exist. So like for a big cat, the soul, the big cat is the soul is imprinting on that big cat's mind. However, that big cat's mind is able to frame things that this is what you need to do to survive. You know, because one aspect of the Emperor that does come up repeatedly is the fact that the Emperor is able to read the energy of the Empress via intuition and thereby bring it into form, right? So
The Morrigan's very interesting, and sovereignty.
yes, and this is the Dark Goddess deck, so of course it's going to be a female.
Yeah.
We're going to have a female figure, but one of the things that they point out about the Morrigan is that the Morrigan is of course a goddess, and there are traditional goddess aspects of her, like healing and so on and so forth, but she's also a warrior, and she also commanded kings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so she called the shots, or the kings consulted the Morrigan via oracles or however they did it, but she was calling the shots. And we have, of course, the Aries attribution with the red. She's got her spear. She's and she's actually, this is interesting, she's building a wall, she's building a structure, but it's made out of skulls. She's not taking any prisoners. And then of course we have
that too, in sort of Aztec and sort of Mesoamerican cultures where they had sacrificial rites, human sacrificial rites, where there were walls of skulls, right? So, yeah.
And then we've got, and she's essentially, she's the protector of nature.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's by setting these boundaries, by marking out these boundaries, that nature is actually able to flourish. So it's kind of like a bonsai. It kind of makes me think of like a bonsai, when you're shaping the
Yes.
tree to
Okay.
create something. And this is right here. I mean, you can't get more CJ than this card. This is what CJ does all day, right?
Executive decision making.
it's and she's got her cup of coffee. She's actually in her house at her desk. She's got her cup of coffee. She's got her laptop. She's writing shit down, talking on the phone, all at the same time. Basically, she's basically and this is the companion card to the God card, right? So this is and so the as above deck is stuff that goes on spiritually in the realm of myth, and the so below deck is stuff that happens in practical reality. So this is a practical reality metaphor for the emperor, i.e., somebody who gets shit done.
Yep.
Right? She's getting shit done, and interestingly, she's not unhappy about it. Like she's just.
No, this is somebody who enjoys getting shit done.
Yeah, she's in her zone. Yeah.
Yeah, she's in her element, and that's something that, yeah.
Yeah.
Executive, I mean, sort of executive decision making, that executive command, that executive part of your brain that allows you to make all of these decisions.
But she's also motivated. I mean, this deck was done way before COVID, obviously. I mean, several years, but she's like at home, like, and so that makes it even more, even more significant. She's in her own space doing this, right? She's in her own space. She's wearing comfortable clothes. She's got on her like pagan jewelry, in her, so she's basically calling the shots. She is interacting with society in the way that she chooses. So
I'm just stretching that. I've been standing all day.
Oh yeah, you've got the desk that, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, oh, I'm stretching. And then I'm like wearing Converse, which don't have any support in them.
Yeah.
I love them. They're usually comfortable.
Kurt, look, I did not, when you first turned me on to this dual deck, I was not impressed with whatever cards I saw that I chose to look up. And the more we study it, the more I'm impressed with it. Now, there's still some images that don't speak to me, but that's in every deck. Oh, and don't let me forget to show y'all at least one, if not two cards at the end, because I want to show you at least the crow. So I can't see me right now. I can only see the screen and Denise, but can you see this?
Yes. In fact, I'm going to stop screen sharing so that
we're
at the end of the. Okay, show it again.
Yeah.
Say something so you'll pop up on the screen.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
I'm not popping up on my screen. You'll be on
the video.
Well, I don't care about that, but.
Well, I know, but the card will be on the video. That's what.
Yeah.
But like, I'm really starting to like this crow deck. And so I assume the 4 feathers is for the number 4 that we were referencing, that Paula kept going on about. The Aries. Now, I don't know about the sword. So, well, I guess that's like the staff. Yes.
It could be like the staff. Yeah. Or,
the red of the throne, the balance. So I see the mountains on either side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I guess, and then he's in profile again, which speaks to that, not seeing the face of God directly on, I guess.
I think you're right. Yeah, I'm just now making that connection. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to show you all that one. The only other one that I kind of wanted to share, and this one's harder to read. And I'm sorry, you guys, but the book is different than the name of the deck, but it's something about dreamers. And it's like a photo collage. And there's a lot of different stuff in them.
Mm. Okay.
So I guess that's the world in the sky behind him.
Mhm.
Aries, and then some like red orb. I don't know if that's the Mars thing or maybe the world is beneath him, but he's got water flowing like crazy there in that world beneath him. So it's almost like maybe that's Mars and Moon in the sky behind him. Now he's got a blackbird, so a crow or a raven sitting on top of his throne.
It's
It's
probably
not an eagle, it's not a hawk.
it's a raven probably because that's the ravens are sacred to Morrigan. So that's so that would be, you know, the Morrigan attribution. If other tarot are creators are feeling that, then that's
Well, and then could I interpret also as that connection between this world and
yeah,
spiritual world?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yay. Well,
Oh, I'm surprised you didn't have Gaia in there.
Because I can't look up on that. I can't look up the cards all at once. Like the other apps will let me see all the cards, so I can just like go through and I'll click Emperor. You know, that one that app I have to flip through every single card, and I just didn't have time to do that. We'll see. And he's got the horns and the
He's beautiful.
yeah.
I mean, this is a gorgeous deck.
Oh, look at the mountain lion.
yeah, we saw that
Oh, that's-
elsewhere.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's cool.
And he's got a genuinely kind, you know, he's not one of the scowling ones.
The stern ones. They're stern and scowly, some of them.
Yep. The Mitch McConnell.
And he's got this symbol above him that's like on a plaque on a tree, and it's got the eye in the middle. So maybe Eye of Horus.
or something like that. There probably is something very specific in the Gaia deck that is, and you'll have to read in the book.
I'll pull the book. I didn't read that yet.
Yeah, because that book is like one of the most detailed books I've ever seen on a deck.
Well, I'm putting Pollock first in my reading.
Yeah.
And Denise, did you pull your Dreaming Way?
You know, I didn't. I was like, what I've been feeling lately is like I cycle in my tarot decks
Right.
around.
So again, like with the Empress, how I told you it was much more subdued and it wasn't, he's more like there is zero red, it's all blue and green, zero red, zero.
Oh,
Interesting.
that is a very interesting interpretation. Yeah.
There is none. How interesting. What about Capricorn? I don't know. That sort of reflection of water, that blue and that green and that,
Right.
you know.
And he's got water behind him, like a flowing water.
Maybe it's that more, we were talking about the benign leadership, the servant.
It's almost, I get very contemplative.
Right. I was thinking the thinker. Yeah.
The thinker, very much, and he's almost in that position.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then Denise, did you pull your crystal visions?
I did pull the crystal visions. That's this guy right here, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's completely like almost opposite of what we just saw in the Dreaming Way, right? You know, there's
Right, exactly.
I think you could argue that the Dreaming Way one is Capricorn. It looks that one looks more like Capricorn.
yeah. So
There's
that was,
there's no Aries, and I don't think
that's interesting. This one, this deck, and it's out of like, I don't think Amazon right now, it's like they're out of stock maybe. It's called the Revelations Tarot. And what's interesting about it is that,
Let it focus when you get it there.
got it
Is that the
No,
one that has
Pull
the
it back a little towards you.
better?
Yes.
There we go. So it's got the upright and reversed.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Artwork.
One. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let me see. And what's it called?
It's called the Revelations Tarot.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, it's got both.
Zach wants,
Oh.
here it is upright, and then I'll flip and show you the reversal.
Wow, that's too cool.
When this deck made a whole bunch of like best deck to help with like reversal reads and things like that. So it's gotten a lot of praise, which is really, really cool. I haven't played with it much at all. In fact, I pulled some of these decks out that I just haven't played with yet. But I thought this would be kind of fun to share with you guys.
That's super cool.
Two different interpretations of the Emperor there on the same card, definitely.
Yeah. So this one's a real cool deck.
That is really cool. That's the first card from that deck that I've actually really liked. I've seen several of them, but
I have a tarot funny for that. So when you do a spread where it's something that crosses you and you lay it sideways, how are you going to read that?
I know. How are you gonna? You're gonna be like, you have to pick. Are you reading it upways or are you reading it reversal? Right?
I mean, I know you know how you lay it down, but that was just a joke.
well, the Emperor is one of those cards, and so, you know, and Pollock I think says this a lot. You know, is that it's one of those cards that's very much defined by the other cards around it.
Yeah.
You know,
That makes a lot of sense.
whether it's going to be, whether you're going to look at a like stern emperor, whether you're going to look at a benevolent, you know, whether you're talking, if you're talking about an actual person, whether you're talking about somebody's father, or you're talking about, you know, a potential, you know, or if the empress shows up in the same reading, it could mean like a love match or something. You know, there's all different.
sort of counterpart.
Yeah.
That was great. Thanks for putting that together, Kurt. I always love your collages and look
Yes,
forward to
thank
it.
you.
It's a lot of fun.
Thanks. I like to try to figure out how I'm going to position the, you know, which ones I'm going to put next.
That's the fun. That's part of that. That's fun, right? It's a fun
The
part.
story I'm trying to tell with the, yeah.
It's
Okay,
like,
I think we're does anybody, do we have anything else we want to cover tonight?
No.
Okay.
think of
I will
anything. Nothing that's for nothing's for like the broader consumption, you know.
be recording. Stop. Yeah.